Okay, I've got the English recording.
Can somebody tell us what's going on?
Somebody
You've
has
been
to
sitting
know
here
what's
for
going
20
on.
minutes.
Can you speak up and see if they can hear you?
Hello.
Can you hear Viviana? We're about to start. Hello, can the Zoom audience hear?
Yes, I think we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Now we
we can now, but everyone was wondering what was happening for 20 minutes.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Sorry about the delay. Technology always betrays us, but here we are. Thank you to all of you who joined us in person and online. Thank you all. First things first, si alguien necesita traducción en español, tenemos a Alba aquí que le puede dar un dispositivo para que entonces usted pueda escuchar la presentación en español. Si necesita interpretación en español, aquellos que están en línea, lo que deben hacer es ir a la parte de abajo de su pantalla, van a ver un globo terráqueo. Cuando le dan clic ahí, pueden entonces entrar al canal de español, van a ver exactamente lo mismo que todos vemos, pero van a escuchar la presentación en español con nuestro intérprete del día. All right, now that that's taken care of and our Spanish speakers are taken care of, welcome everybody to our first SGC training of the school year 22-23, my very first SGC training in person. When I took over this role, we were in the middle of the pandemic, so I'm used to seeing all of your faces, but not in person, so welcome. Today, first of all, I want to thank Solange Cardenas. She's our SCSC here at Naylor, and Principal Edson, who will be maybe popping in and out. So thank you, Naylor, for hosting our SGC training. Really appreciate it. And our partners at the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, CADE. We have here Conrad Balsing. Yes, Conrad Balsing with us, who is their staff attorney, and he will be going over SGC roles, responsibilities, and how that impacts your students. And I say your students, right, because you have children, we have principals here, so all of our students' education, and how we can work together then to make those relationships stronger, better, and long lasting. So welcome, Conrad. Thank you, everybody. Conrad.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Vivian. So I'm going to try to do this in a way where my back is not to the in-person audience, but I'm going to have to click the computer once in a while. So the first thing I'll say is the whole point of school governance councils is student achievement. The whole purpose that they exist is to improve student achievement. So although I'm going to be talking about some technical stuff legally and within your policy here in Hartford, just know that every single thing I say should be through the lens of trying to improve student achievement. Okay, so this is a bit of an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm happy to go for a full hour from whatever time it is right now, but I understand if I have to be bumped. So we have roles and responsibilities, Connecticut State Law. I'm going to talk briefly about the Freedom of Information Act because it is very important for school governance councils because they are subject to the State Freedom of Information Act. And then this fourth point is I'm going to talk a little bit about tracking student achievement through school governance councils and sort of what data the state has on that. Okay, so this first point is basically what I was leading off with, that the whole point is to improve student achievement. And the primary way that school governance councils attempt to do that is by having parents, staff, and community leaders work together. It's the whole point. However, they serve in an advisory capacity. You'll see that mentioned a few different times and in a few different ways, but they're really not going to be going in and entering contracts or binding the school or staff to do anything specific. They're really advising. And so this is sort of a formal charge here, but they're charged with assisting the school administration in making programmatic and operational changes in order to improve something you'll hear me say quite frequently: school achievement and student achievement. So I'm going to be talking about state law, Freedom of Information Act, et cetera, but know that Hartford has a school governance council policy in its overall district policy. It's numbered 1211, and you'll find it online, and I'm sure there's a physical policy manual too, but it will lay out a lot of the information that is required of members and membership and school governance councils in general. So one of the things it lays out is a little bit of member roles and responsibilities, but not for every single member. These are the two that it primarily speaks to: the parent chair of the council and the principal who serves as co-chair. They have very specific responsibilities, mainly with controlling the meeting and setting the agendas for the meetings. I printed out your policy. If anybody has questions about any of the bullet points in it, I can go over it, but I'm not going to go over, their individual roles, because those are just two people. But this is actually really important. In your policy 1211, you have 11 responsibilities as an SGC. And where those 11 responsibilities come from, they are not just made up. So I'll get to this a little more in the state law section, but there are approximately 8 mandated responsibilities of school governance councils and 4 permissive responsibilities. So I looked through your 11, and they pretty much mirror a combination of those 12. So obviously there's 4 permissive, you don't need all 4. So the total could be 12, but you can actually have more than 12, because a little bit of a spoiler alert, one of the permissive functions of an SBC is that they are allowed to advise the administration on any important matters related to the school. So that's kind of like a catch-all responsibility. Anything of importance to the school on which you serve can be one of the responsibilities, or it can at least be included in this policy through an amendment of the overall Board of Education. So I might as well just go through them.
Mute if you're in the Zoom.
If you're in the Zoom, we're good. Okay, great. I have a habit of talking away from the microphone, so just flag me down if I start holding this off like that, holding it off to my side. So also the other thing I'll say is we can do this pretty casually. You can interject and ask questions, and online, feel free to type questions in the chat. Maybe Deb will see it, or raise your hand via Zoom, and then she'll call on you. You can interject whenever you want if you want to ask the question. So I'll try to make it through these questions. Ready?
Members joining us in the Zoom to please make sure they're on mute.
Zoom members, if you can hear me, please mute yourself. It gets a little bit of feedback for the other Zoom members and for Deb. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try to breeze through these 11 responsibilities that are mandated to Hartford School Governance Council. These are summaries of the 11 responsibilities. If you actually want to see a little bit more detail in each responsibility, there's only maybe 1 or 2 sentences tacked on to each of these quote unquote summaries, but this is basically what you're going to be doing on a school governance council, or at least what you should be doing. So you analyze student achievement data and school needs in relation to the school's improvement plan, which is a very formal plan. Number 2, assist in developing and reviewing the school accountability plan. 3, review fiscal objectives of the draft budget. This is kind of an interesting one that I get questions a lot, because How the budget is constructed and drafted and proposed is actually very technical. So each school governance council or each district kind of has its own sort of procedure for how the school governance council actually engages in reviewing the fiscal objectives. This is kind of a cool one. You get to participate in hiring the school principal and other administrators. Number 5, assist the principal, and this is sort of what we were talking about earlier in one of the main charges, in making programmatic and operational changes. Develop and improve a school parent involvement policy. Promote the school as a parental choice relative to its enrollment goals, of course. Work with administrators to approve a school compact for parents, guardians, and students related to school goals and academic performance. Again, to improve student learning. Review data on partnership impact and the viability of new partnerships. And also this one is tacked on. I think it's a little bit separate, but it is included in 9. Review and improve the after-school program. Two more, you almost made it. So advise and assist the principal in the analysis of school survey data and in the creation of programs to improve school climate. 11, the ability to vote for a school to be reconstituted using one of several available models. I don't like really talking about that point because it's incredibly complicated and most schools don't do it, but there is a statutory charge that you have the ability to vote for a school to be reconstituted in a different format. It doesn't mean you can start making the school do whatever you dream up. There are very specific forms that a school can take. There's, yep. Yeah. What does that mean? Great question. The one question I was hoping not to get. So if you look at the statute and if you look at Hartford Policy 1211, it's basically there are 6 different kinds of state authored and federally authored school governance structures. It's basically a different way for the administration and the staff and the students to be. I mean, I don't even know how else to explain it. No one's ever done it, at least with my involvement. You can only do it in very certain instances if you've existed for a certain number of years, and you can only do it a certain amount of times within a certain number of years. And also the Commissioner of Education only lets 25 schools do it every year. If you look at your policy and you read policy 11 under roles and responsibilities and you are interested in it, you can have, district staff email me and I can talk about it more, but it's really something very technical and honestly a little archaic and strange. Okay, so it is important to know what you do not do as an SGC. I'm just going to start saying SGC because it's easier for me instead of saying School Governance Council. Plus half the time I say Student Governance Council, which is just not a thing. So what you do not do as a SGC, you do not manage the school. You have no managerial authority. You have advisory authority. You do not supervise staff. You cannot enter into contracts as an SGC or as an SGC member. You can advise the principal to then advise the superintendent or whatever the chain of command is here. You are not to discuss individual issues between teachers and students and or parents. Again, that goes back to sort of management and supervision, which is what you don't do. You do not have a say in student eligibility for school admission. And you do not determine allocations for class or student assignment. So the power of membership on an SGC is the power to cast a vote with the rest of the SGC. You do not have individual authority to do anything as an SGC member. Your authority is through voting amongst the whole, which is about 15 members. So you are one of 15. You have no individual authority to really do much of anything. And again, SGC members cannot commit the school to policies, acts, or expenditures. They are advisory. And this is kind of variations on a theme here, but just because you are holding technically office as an SGC member, you do not have administrative responsibility or the ability to command any staff services. You cannot ask a teacher to tutor your school, tutor your student, child, just because you're an SGC member. So this is very specific to Hartford SGC. You must attend all required trainings provided by the district. That is in your policy. Teacher members must be in active service at the school, and parent members must actively have a child attending the school. Now, this is something Hartford came up with, but it's in your policy. It is binding on you as an SGC member. If you miss 2 consecutive meetings or half of the meetings overall, it doesn't even say you can be removed. It technically says you will be removed. Just as an FYI, anybody who may be skirting that. And SGCs in Hartford must meet at least 6 times a year. So if you meet the minimum, which is 6, and you miss 3, even if they're not consecutive, well, that's not good. Yes. Then.
Hold on, could you please repeat the question before you
Oh,
answer?
yeah.
Thank you.
So what happens if they wanted me to repeat the question so they can hear it on Zoom? So the question was for our Zoom audience, what happens if you are elected as a parent member and your child leaves the school for whatever reason? You will have a vacant membership. You can no longer serve. You know, these are very specific and hard and fast rules. You know, so if you don't have a child who is currently attending the school, then you vacate the membership and then another election has to be held to replace that. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about Connecticut State Law. This is a little bit of history, but basically, oh, sorry, I thought I had a question. The law about school governance councils was created in 2010. I believe Hartford actually predated that. I think they had school governance councils before 2010 in a voluntary sort of sense. But in 2010 was when the legal mandate came down that certain schools had to have them. And also basically any school in Connecticut can voluntarily start one of these things. But if you are in a mandated SGC, you have to follow all these rules I'm droning on about. So the general statutes now contain the law. If you don't know what the general statutes are, it's basically our state civil law, so the non-criminal code. It's called the general statutes. You'll see it abbreviated CGS frequently, or frequently you'll see just the word section capitalized. So in my presentation and in any other document or presentation you see, if you see something that says section 10-223J, what you're talking about is the civil Connecticut code. And this is sort of what I mentioned earlier about Hartford having its own policy, a district-wide policy. That policy, I'll reiterate one more time. is not specific to each individual SGC in Hartford. It is for all SGCs throughout all of Hartford. There are rules that they all have to comply with. It was last revised in 2013. That is actually a typo. I'm selling you guys a little short. It was revised in 2014. So you had one more revision after 2014. So here's the membership. I'm not going to really get into this because I presume you guys are members, you kind of know what you guys consist of. But there's 15 members for elementary and middle schools, parents, teachers, community leaders, and then the school principal or his or her designee. What's kind of important is the right column, which is who has to elect these people. Because I get questions sometimes about like, oh, can the PTO or the PTA, basically run the election for the teachers at the school? Or can we limit it to only like PTA, PTO members, questions like that. But basically, all of the teachers of the school elect the SGC. You can't limit it to just PTA or PTO members. You can choose to only nominate PTO or PTA members. Sorry, I should probably be talking about more of the parents when I'm talking about PTA and PTO. But basically, all of the teachers in the school have to participate in the election. PTOs and PTAs can kind of run the election process. I think that's fairly common. But the actual nominations and who is eligible has to be from the entire teacher body, and the election has to be consisting of the entire teacher body. And so the election of parents has to be, again, parents of students attending the school, and each household gets one vote. It doesn't matter how many children you have. You can't fudge the numbers just by having more kids. Community leaders with the school, elected by the parent, guardian members, and the teacher members. So this one's a little interesting because it's elected by the actual members. So the first two is to get members. This third one is election of the members. And community leaders, that can be interpreted pretty widely. Whatever you think is a member, a community leader in your district, it could be a religious figure, an athletic leader, a political leader. Whoever you deem a community leader is eligible for that position. Then you have the school principal. He's automatically there, she's automatically there, but he or she can designate a person. But they're non-voting. So almost identical for high school SGCs. The only addition here is students. You get 2 student members on a high school SGC. They are elected from the whole student body, and they are also non-voting, just like the principal. Okay, so here you have a reference to those general statutes that I was talking about. Connecticut Civil Code is basically just our state law. It is non-criminal. And these are the terms of members. Voting members have 2-year terms, and they are limited to 4 terms. The non-voting student members serve 1-year terms and have a limit of 2 terms. Actually, a point I should make. You'll see one category is left out here, and that's the principal, because you're just kind of stuck with him or her. There's not really a term for them, they're just there. So this is something I want to note to Hartford specifically, that you have an inaccuracy in your SGC policy. You should communicate this to the superintendent, I presume, because they're the ones who are going to liaise with the board more likely, unless principals in Hartford connect with the board. But it's more common that the superintendent connects with the overall Hartford board. But basically, your Hartford board has to amend one of your things in the policy. There's something inaccurate. So basically, when I said before that the voting members are allowed to serve 4 terms, Hartford currently limits it to only 2 terms. That is just wrong, but you have an excuse. And the excuse is that it used to be 2 terms, but it was changed in 2019. And like I said, it was last amended in 2014 here in Hartford. So that's your excuse. But I would advise the powers that be to communicate with the superintendent that be to then suggest to the board to change that, because that is not currently compliant with state law. This you're still cool with. This non-voting member still serving 2 terms. Hartford still adheres to that. And my one disclaimer is that this is based on your policy available online. There may be some hard copy available somewhere that has been amended after 2019, but that's just what I found. Okay, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but basically what you do in Hartford as an SGC member is contained in state law. There's mandatory responsibilities in state law, and there's permissive responsibilities in state law. Hartford has 11 mandatory responsibilities because they have made some of the permissive ones mandatory in your district specifically. I already went over the 11. There's no way on earth I'm going to go over them again unless you have a specific question. I'm happy to answer any specific question you have about it. And again, that 4th permissive function in state law is a bit of a catch-all. So if you want to get creative in what you want the SGCs in Hartford to start doing, you have a mechanism to start adding responsibilities to the overall Hartford DOE policy. But the one thing you can't, I should just mention this for the sake of completeness. You cannot advise on matters of collective bargaining, which basically means unions and union contracts. Connecticut is a heavily unionized state. Teachers, paras, administrators. That is something that you are just not allowed to do as an SGC. So, again, reconstitution. I should have probably just skipped over the slide. But 6 different forms. There are specific procedural requirements about how you can even approach the thought of reconstituting a school, let alone the actual reconstitution of the school. It is contained in state law. That is the state law. You have these PowerPoints printed out. You can email them amongst yourself. You can look at the state law if you are so curious. And also there is a very specific vote procedure about reconstituting a school. So, there is no requirement that SGCs create bylaws, but they can if they wish to. I'm going to be honest with you. I looked at your Hartford SGC policy, and it's pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that would be covered in a bylaw. So a bylaw is basically, how best to explain it, a more specific and nuanced version of a policy. It's more going to lay out situations and like what you have to do in a situation. So this is a very specific example of what could be contained in a bylaw, but it is already in your policy. And it's voting and how voting is conducted and the numbers that are required of voting. So I think your policy is actually pretty solid. But again, any school can create, its own bylaws about procedure. However, it cannot go against the overall district policy. I should say that. So your voting method as an SGC member is not contained in state law, but it's in your Hartford policy, which is that all decisions are made by consensus, which means everybody agrees, all 15 members or all 17 members if you're a high school SGC. But if there is no consensus, then by a 2/3 majority vote. So what that all means is basically that everything is voted upon by a 2/3 majority. Ideally, you'll do a consensus where everybody agrees and is on the same page and is loving whatever you're talking about. But in the absence of that, a 2/3 majority. So on a 15-member SGC for elementary and middle schools, that means 10 people have to affirmatively vote for something. On a 17-member SGC, what on God's earth is 2/3 of 17? Maybe 10 again, maybe 11, I don't know. Maybe one of the math students in the room can tell me and email me what 2/3 of 17 is. It might still be 10, but it might also be 11. Homework for the SGC. Okay, so I don't want to drone on about Freedom of Information Act stuff, but it's actually incredibly important as an SGC member. It is a legal mandate of SGCs. I'm sure you've heard this phrase either through your membership or just in reading the news. It's a very common phrase, Freedom of Information requests. There are two kinds. There is the Federal Act and there's the State Act. As a Connecticut school SGC, you are subject to the State Act, which is contained in those general statutes I was talking about. And it's contained in Title I. It starts at 1-200 and goes on for 40 to 50 boring subsections. But it is incredibly, incredibly important. The two takeaways from the Freedom of Information Act is that your meetings have to be in public and the records and communications related to SGC business is also subject to public inspection. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but just know I deal with questions about the Freedom of Information Act every single day of my life, and from people who have been on boards of education for decades. There is just so much nuance and so much gray area and so much confusion about what people have to do in certain situations that you should not let its complexity sort of scare you from thinking about it. And if you're a nerd like me, it can even be kind of interesting to think about sometimes. But just know your meetings have to be in public and your communications related to SGC business through a district email or even, sometimes Facebook and other email accounts. If you're talking about SGC business, it is subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. Of course, there's always the power of redaction, and it's like a hybrid message with like some personal stuff in it. You don't have to disclose the personal stuff, but stuff about SGC business is subject to disclosure. Again, I can come back and talk about the Freedom of Information Act forever. I'm always happy to talk about it. Administrators can email me with questions. But I actually kind of have a question. Do you guys do virtual meetings for your SGCs? Is it fully virtual? Like there's no in-person component? Fully virtual. Yeah, I mean, that's totally cool. I mean, we're in a new world now, honestly, because of the last, 3 years and legally the past 2 years with these two laws that I promise you I'm not going to get into. But basically what it does is it allows you to hold these meetings fully virtually or partially virtually, which is commonly called hybrid. And if you have clerks of the SGC, if somebody has sort of a hybrid function to take minutes or post the agenda, that sort of role, they've probably thought about some of this stuff in some capacity, but there's a lot of detail to it. So in this PowerPoint slide, I made some charts for you guys that you can reference. And what it does is it compares virtual meetings with in-person meetings. So if Hartford ever chooses to go back to in-person meetings, you'll sort of see the difference between requirements of virtual meetings and in-person meetings. So the three most important components are notice, agenda, and the minutes. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but those phrases can kind of be new to some people sometimes. Maybe not agenda, but notice. What you're talking about when you're talking about notice is that the public has to be aware that you are about to meet as an SGC. And there are certain timelines about when they have to be apprised that you're about to meet. Agenda is just what y'all are going to talk about. Yep, question. Anybody, really, honestly, they have to be meetings held in public. They are subject to the open meeting law, which means there's a little bit of a distinction. People sometimes say public meetings, but that's a little bit of a technicality. They are not technically public meetings. They are meetings held in public, which means that when you talk on an SGC or at an SGC meeting, it has to be in the public eye, with the exception of something called executive session. Can anybody raise their hand if they know what an executive session is? Okay, great. That means I'm going to talk about it. So executive session is when you're in a meeting at an SGC and you're about to talk about something that does not have to be in public. There are 5 specific things that don't have to be talked about in public. They are statutory. They are in the FOI Act, the Freedom of Information Act. And there are very limited bases that you're allowed to go into executive session. I would highly suggest that your administrators prepare some sort of tutorial for SGC members, either through we have a pretty great commission here in Connecticut called the FOI Commission that is incredibly helpful and incredibly informative about the open meetings laws. And they have a lot of documents on the website, the state website. I'm going to sort of offer some training right now. Honestly, I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'll talk about this stuff as long as you guys need me to talk about it. What was the question again? So I wanted to repeat it. What was does anybody remember what her question was? I just want to repeat it for the Zoom audience. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So her question was, now I remember, it was who has to be able to attend? And the answer is basically anybody. It's a meeting that has to be open to the public, and anybody from the public can attend your SGC meeting. One thing I will say is that a lot of times when people call me or email me, they think I'm sort of like the FOI police or something like that, like I'm going to start reporting people. I want you to do better tomorrow. I want you to tell me what you might not be doing right so that I can make sure you're doing it right tomorrow. That's basically my only role. So you're free to sort of ask questions of me and be like, well, I know a friend who's not doing their meetings in public. And then I'll just talk about your friend and help your friend. If that makes you feel better. Again, there is no way I'm going to read every word on this chart, but just know it's in your packets. It's in the electronic version of this PowerPoint, which Viviana and Deb are free to disseminate to literally anybody who asks, at least from my end of the bargain. If they want to limit it, that's fine, but I don't care who you send this to. But basically you have notice, agenda, and minutes. Again, this phrase might be foreign to people, but the minutes of a meeting are basically just the notes of what happened at your meeting. There is flexibility in what is contained in the minutes, except for one very specific thing. You need to have the votes contained in the minutes. So when, as an SGC, you vote on something, you need to have how people voted and the individuals, actually. You need to list the names of who voted yes or no or abstained. Abstain is just a fancy word of meaning choosing not to vote. You can get a little creative with this. Like, let's say you have 15 members and they're all present. So you list the attendance and you'd say all 15 members are present or list them. And then if your voting is all by consensus, everybody agrees, just say, all members voted yay or yes, whatever. You don't have to list every single person if somebody can figure out that everybody's there, everybody said yes. So there's two charts here, and I'm going to speak a little bit about why there's two different charts. Does anybody know the difference between a regular meeting and a special meeting? I have no cash on me, so I can't offer a prize. But that didn't incentivize anybody anyway. Okay, so a regular meeting under our Freedom of Information Act are the meetings that you plan to hold for the entire year. So your policy says you have to meet 6 times, that means 6 meetings. So I'm too lazy to walk the computer, but if I went back a slide, the regular meetings have to be posted by January 31st. So if you have a minimum of 6 meetings and you plan to meet only 6 times throughout the year, those have to be contained in notice, just some sort of like posting you can see on the district website or in the superintendent's office, wherever you normally post things of importance. I'm gonna stop being lazy and I'm gonna go back. So by January 31st, you have to have a schedule of those 6 meetings. And those are your regular meetings. Special meetings are actually not anything specifically special. They are just meetings that you have beyond the 6 meetings, if you hold the minimum amount of meetings. So any other time your SGC wants to meet for whatever reason, it's called a special meeting. And the notice of that special meeting has to be provided 24 hours before your meeting. So you have to let the public know that you're about to meet at least 24 hours in advance. So there's regular meetings and there's special meetings. There is a third category. I don't like talking about it because it is so rarely used, but it's called an emergency meeting. And it actually has a very legal definition. It basically means we have to meet for a reason that is so serious and so time sensitive that we can't even give the public 24 hours notice. It means we have to meet 2 day, 2 night. We cannot let anybody know because we just don't have time to let people know. But I'm going to be honest with you. It has been held to be okay in so few amounts of instances. It basically has to be something incredibly severe and incredibly time sensitive. It can't just be laziness. It can't just be forgetfulness. It can't just be like, oh man, I really want to talk about this tonight. It has to be something so incredibly time sensitive. Yes, question. So a court case that I just first thing that popped into my mind was the superintendent had resigned that day and he had a provision in his contract that would trigger a large payment if the board did not meet and find a replacement within a certain amount of days. And he did not let the board know about that trigger provision until it was within the 24-hour window. So,
This
it's
is an
not that
example of an
severe of a
emergency
problem.
meeting.
It's just like, we're gonna go a few days without a superintendent, but because there was a lot of money at issue and it was time sensitive, it was held to be okay. So that's really gonna be, what you're working with here is when you're really dealing with time sensitive things that actually affect something, It can't just be like, oh, we forgot to buy lemonade for the bake sale. And that's in 4 hours. You can try it, it's not gonna go well once it makes its way to the courts. And the other thing I will say is like any sort of tragedy. I have not seen a court case on it, mainly because somebody would have to actually, one thing I'll mention is FOI commission does not go around and police all this stuff. They don't go around and say, who's been holding emergency meetings improperly? Somebody from the public has to actually file a complaint against you. They have to complain. So I would imagine if there was some sort of tragedy, well, there are crazy people, but you'd have to be pretty crazy to complain, that your board is meeting within 24 hours because of the tragedy, because you need to talk about things and maybe act upon things. But just know, time sensitive and hopefully severe. But I wouldn't even really think about it unless you absolutely need it. So I don't know how you guys do clerks for your SGC meetings, like who takes notes or takes the minutes, or if you guys even do have such a position. Off the top of my head, I think your Harper policy says that the parent chair designates somebody to take minutes. I think that's one of their responsibilities. So whoever that person is, these are two important things about the minutes. It's that thing about voting. The voting has to be in the minutes. And also, this one is kind of weird. The voting has to be written down within 48 hours of the meeting. That is separate from being contained in the minutes, because the minutes only need to be available within 7 days. But the voting needs to be written down within 48 hours. So what that means is somebody from the public can come to your central office or your principal's office, wherever the wherever visitors are allowed, but also wherever these minutes are contained, wherever the clerk houses them, and can say, hey, at hour 49, how did the SGC vote on this issue? If they couldn't attend and they were curious. Don't worry, it's in the slides, it'll be there forever. You can forget it immediately, but this is just really good reference stuff to know about. This is something I get questions about every single day of my life. So meetings, so SGCs are public entities because they are an extension of the school. They are public entities. And so that means when they meet, it has to be in public, speaking to your question earlier. So because you have to hold your meetings in public, unfortunately, the definition of meeting is actually kind of nuanced. It doesn't mean just hanging out in this room together with me. When you are communicating and you're talking about SGC business, there's a word, it's a weird word, it's called a quorum. It basically just means a majority of the people on the SGC. So this is different than the voting, the 2/3 majority. A quorum is just the majority of the SGC. So quick math, if you have 15 people on an SGC, more than half would be 8. Yeah, because 7 would be 14. Okay. So when 8 of you are talking outside of a meeting, whether it's in a WhatsApp group or a Facebook post or any sort of group chat or email, you technically should not be talking about SGC matters because you are technically having an improper meeting. I'll say that again if I have to. You can ask me a question about it. But basically, just sitting in a room or being on Zoom together is not the only way you can be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. If you are emailing amongst a quorum about SGC business, you are technically having an improper meeting. So the follow-up question is, okay, so then how do we talk to each other outside of SGC meetings? There's 2 ways. The first way is don't be on any group emails or chats with 8 people or more. That's option 1. Keep it under 8. Or actually, let me add a little nuance. If for some reason your SGC is not at full membership, let's say you're at 9 for whatever reasons, a vacancy or just, people are MIA, then your quorum is going to be smaller. It is basically more than half is definition of quorum. So if you have 9 people, it'd be 5. If you have 15, it'd be 8. So option 1 to get around the communications of a quorum is just don't make it a quorum. Option 2 is that it's not on the slide. We'll talk about this informally, but you can send messages to a quorum, but you cannot respond. You absolutely positively cannot respond. And what boards of education and SGCs do is they will put a template for their emails. At the top of the emails, it will be in big bold letters. For informational purposes, do not reply. It is the first response that triggers our court's ire. That's when they get mad. That's what the discussion is. It's even just a single response. So if you want to send out a news article, you know, as the parent chair or the principal co-chair, or basically any member of the SGC, and you go, I want my entire SGC to know about this. Can you believe what they're doing at XYZ school? You can send that email to the full board, full SGC, but you absolutely cannot reply to it. Because that first reply is technically a discussion, which is technically a meeting. So does anybody want me to rephrase that? Yes, question. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like, what if somebody wants to, you know, this is a terrible metaphor, but drive without a seatbelt? You know, I don't know, like you're just getting yourself in trouble. I mean, there's no other way to, you know, they are intentionally putting you guys at risk. I don't want to be super dramatic. It's not like there's like an FOI jail. Nobody goes to jail for this stuff. You know, the FOI commission, at worst, they can fine up to $1,000 for infractions. But I'm going to be perfectly candid with you. I read a lot of their decisions and court decisions, and they are really remedial. They want you to do better. They want you to do it right the next time. That does not answer your question about what if you have somebody who is intentionally violating this. I just think maybe you have to take them off the emails. I mean, if they're intentionally violating the law, I mean, I don't know what you would even do with somebody like that. I mean, try to talk to them first, you know, but if they're intentionally getting you guys in possible trouble, you know, that's not good for anybody. It's not good. It's reputational harm, honestly. You know, people are just going to lose faith in the SGC. And it's like, what's even the point of that? You know, who would want to harm student achievement? I mean, it's the whole reason they exist. I don't know. So, what was I going to say? Oh, right. So, the first day to do this right is tomorrow. I don't care what you all have been doing in the past. It's not my job to go and talk about what people are doing wrong. I'm just here to kind of help you do things right. So please, either on Zoom or in person, you know, ask me questions about this stuff because it's complicated, it's hard, but you guys are free to have these presentations. You can reference them, and the powers that be at the Hartford Board of Ed, you know, I'm always happy to answer questions from them if you have some sort of chain of command about filtering questions. You know, like if you're on an SGC and you say, hey, Principal Smith, like we need some help with the FOI stuff. Like, can you talk to the superintendent and get that cave guy to come do like an FOI presentation because we're really struggling here? You know, I can always do that for you. Or any other staff. You know, we're all pretty comfortable with the law. Does anybody else have any more questions about communications and when you are having a meeting? No. Just be careful of emailing and messaging greater than half of the group. What are we doing on time, Doug? You have a watch on? 6:15. Oh man, I'm pushing it. So I'm fine to do another 5 minutes. If that's cool with Viviana. Yeah, I mean, I think I started around 5:20. I don't really remember. There's not that many slides left anyway. Oh, just one last section. So Viviana asked me to talk about specific examples about student achievement. And I said, I know just the person to talk to, the person who is in charge of SGCs at the state government. And she said, I'm naming names, we don't have that data. So there is one sort of excuse I'm going to give her on why she doesn't have that data, is that it is very hard to control for what is actually causing improvement or non-improvement in student achievement. It's kind of hard to know what is causing that and what the SGC is specifically having an effect on. There is an EdSite website. If you don't know what this is, it's actually pretty amazing. Even if you're just a parent outside of the SGC, this is a really important website. You can look at school-specific performance data. Literally any data point you can possibly think of is contained online for every single school in the state of Connecticut. So you can compare trends on things like truancy and chronic absenteeism, and college readiness, et cetera, and see what the trends are. The one thing I will say that my contact at the state said is that they do a survey of SGCs every 2 years. It is not comprehensive. It's basically you're clicking through options, but I'm going to read you some of the comments that were given to me from that survey. She actually shared it with me. But if you're on an SGC, you might sort of know all this stuff already, but I'm happy to talk about it a little further. So people claimed that virtual meetings increased SGC participation. I see that shape. What do other people think? For whatever SGC you sit on, did it improve attendance at SGC meetings maybe? I mean, if it didn't, then you're really not, getting much out of the virtual environment other than, being away from people who are possibly COVID positive, which is important, but it's not really speaking to the increased participation. But I will say that other comments is that families had difficulty attending the online meetings. They said it was difficult to log in. Some of them might not have had great internet connections. And something that I'm personally very familiar with, just having like online fatigue and all these online meetings, I'm just staring at a screen can kind of make you zone out a little bit. So I would maybe sort of think about that as an SGC member, how you feel about virtual meetings versus in-person meetings, because there's always the option to go hybrid. You can do partially virtual and partially in person. So people who have, connectivity issues or internet issues, or just don't have a quiet place at home to really concentrate, you can have an in-person space for those people. Sort of like right now, literally we're doing a hybrid meeting right now. That's what we're doing right now. We have people on Zoom who are attending and we're all here in person. So think about that as an SGC member and think of that as possibly something you may want to propose, that you guys might want to pursue hybrid meetings in the future. Okay, so this is sort of a survey of CABE staff. And this is what we feel people have been doing well and what people have talked about with us at presentations like this. What makes an SGC effective? Good professional development. And I should add, attending professional development is really important. Work together efficiently, that's kind of cliche, but is important. The SGC is taken seriously by administrators, teachers, and the board. So hopefully the SGC members themselves take it seriously, but you can scold administrators and teachers at your meetings, not personally, but you can say, hey, we need to start being taken more seriously. Effective SGC coaches. good communication with the community. And then this one, I don't know how many SGCs actually sort of flex their power to do this, but you can request presentations and sort of conferences with, experts. Me, for things like this, school business officials for budgeting issues, they can always say no, but you can ask, you can have these meetings, you can get better at sort of the substance. Because one of those mandated responsibilities is that you have to assist in the budget. So if you go, I have no idea what the budget even looks like, tell the principal, schedule a meeting, or to come to a presentation like this about what a budget is, what's the process, how does it work when a budget gets sent from the school to the district, to the board, and then sent to the town, who is the ultimate financial authority. Don't be afraid to make requests like that. To go back to the first point, develop yourself professionally. I think that's my last slide. I am more than happy to answer questions. You are more than welcome to leave. I shouldn't say that. That's up to Viviana. That's up to Viviana. You can't leave yet.
Will you try to remember to repeat the question?
Oh, yes. And I will repeat the question because I am honestly terrible at that. I always forget. I'm just in the zone. I hear a question, I start talking. So it's up to Deb and Viviana whether you're allowed to leave. But I will stand here for a few minutes if you have questions. Yes. Mhm. Okay, so when you say parents, do you mean parent members of the SGC or members of the public who just have kids? Yes. Oh, yeah, they can, like I said, back to her. I forgot to repeat the question. I told you, I get in the zone, I hear that question, okay, sorry, Zoom people. The question was, are parents allowed to see the budget and the numbers of the budget? And then I had to ask a couple of clarifying questions about, are we talking about all parents or parent members of the SGC? And what was the answer to that clarification? Is it just any parent or SGC members? Yeah. Well, because the meetings have to be in public, you can have every parent in the entire district at every single meeting. They can come, especially if you're having an SGC meeting specific to the budget and their involvement with the budget. All parents are allowed to attend that. They can't participate if they're not a member, but they can sit there. Yeah, of course. Yep. Because it has to be in public. Yeah, no, they have no interaction unless you have public comment as your SGC meeting. Yep. According to so the question was, do SGCs have to be established by October 15th every year? And Viviana said yes, that is policy in Hartford, and I trust Viviana. So yes. Thank you, Viviana. Any more questions? Zoom questions?
Can you access them from the chat or do you want me to? Let me scroll up. Will the handouts be emailed? Yeah. So can he come over with the microphone or can you guys like, okay,
The question in the chat is, will the handouts be emailed? Yes, this will be emailed to everybody. It will also be sent to principals, your family and community support service providers at the schools. So everybody should have this amazing information. I should say, like, especially the two little tables, that's gonna be my Bible from now on. So thank you.
will this recording be sent out and shared?
Will the recording be sent out and shared? Absolutely, also in Spanish. So we just have to, go back to it to be able to like embed it on the website, and it should be available, yes.
Can you only serve 2 terms if you have more than 1 child in the same school? If you have more than 1 child in the school, do you get more terms?
No. I
What happened?
mentioned this earlier about the votes, right? So no,
Okay, the answer,
no, if it's not per child, it's per household, just as the vote, correct? Votes are per household, so.
what happens when no public joins the meeting?
When no public, meaning
If nobody.
the SEC members are in and then nobody extra?
Yeah, I guess it would just go on as usual.
Yeah, you hold, yeah, we hold our meetings. It is publicized. People are invited to come in, but we still have to hold our meeting. And the minutes then will be available.
Can you use an email box that does not accept replies? I guess to save yourself from the accidental meeting.
Not even aware of that technology. Any email that just will not receive a reply.
Does not accept a reply.
Yeah, no, I mean, if that's a thing, then yeah. there's-
Yeah, there's some email addresses that you can't reply to. Like,
We're living in the future, y'all.
no reply
Yeah,
at
Jesus, slides.
hartfordschools.org, for
As
example.
long as there's no reply, that's fine. If it's technological that achieves that, blowing my mind.
All right. Will we get training on EdSite? Oh, that's a good question.
You can request that from the SDE. They've actually done training on HPS. They do presentations. And there's a guy named Ajit who, I don't know if he's like the guy who actually does all the algorithms and electronics, but he loves HPS. So contact Ajit at the SDE.
Magnet parent lives in a suburban town, wonders if they can be on the SGC. Yeah. Any parent, right?
If they're attending a school.
They don't have to be a
Yeah,
part.
yeah. Yeah, if they're
So-
attending the school.
You can be a suburban parent of a Hartford school and be a
As long as
member of the
that's
SGC if you have a child in that. Those are all the questions from our chat board. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Viviana.
Thank you, everybody. For those of you who are still here, thank you. Thank you to those online, and we will see you. I think we meet again for the budget forum. Fun. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
November 10th. The budget forum is on November 10th.